and never will be, although he continues to crop up in other comic books, and every few years Marvel Comics dust him off and give him a new series. He was a surgeon, perhaps the greatest in the world, but he was vain and proud and callous towards others. Then a car crash left him with paralysed hands, a genius no longer able to perform. And so he went in search of a cure, finding salvation of a different sort, and in the process becoming a master of a different skill, the occult. I give you Dr. Strange, master of the mystic arts. Doctor Strange first appeared in July 1963 as the backup feature in Marvel's Strange Tales.
When you open the first Doctor Strange story, the Nightmare story, and there's this rain on the window pane, and you pull in on this guy who obviously cannot sleep, you're immediately sucked into this story. It's got this film noir kind of quality to it. The panels are small, but yet at the same time the landscapes are expansive. When Doctor Strange gets into his ectoplasmic form, goes into the nightmare dimension, you begin to see these shapes and you begin to see these geometric things, and it's just incredible.
I don't think any other artist would have dared have pages where there are just little pathways into shapes. I mean, Doctor Strange is going into some other place and it's a shape.
Doctor Strange's entire universe, with all of these psychedelic floating giant mouths and cubes and spheres, you suspect that probably Ditko was investing an awful lot of his own personal symbology in just the odd floating shapes in the background.
He really is almost being psychedelic before people took drugs.
Hello, my name is Kat Ironwood, and I've been involved in comics as an editor for many years. My interest in Steve Ditko goes back to my teenage years when I first was reading Marvel Comics, and I loved Doctor Strange. I saw Spider-Man and I liked it, but Doctor Strange just sort of did something for me. It was very exciting to me because it was so unusual. Me and my friends who were Ditko cultists, who were hippies, who used marijuana and psychotropics of various sorts, DMT, LSD, psilocybin, mescaline, peyote. We certainly believed that Steve Ditko was on drugs.
If you read the Tom Wolfe's Electric Kool-Aid Acid Test, a lot of the characters in there would take the Doctor Strange comic and they would look at the pages and they would start dropping acid.
Very odd piece of work in that Steve Ditko, who was politically very conservative, was suddenly the idol of a whole generation of hippies who were reading some kind of drug parable into these colourful other dimensions that Doctor Strange was zipping through, all without ever leaving his Greenwich Village apartment. He would just be sitting there on the floor in a trance while imagining that he was battling the dread Dormammu in some kind of zone of the nether dimensions.
I asked Steve about that. I said, Steve, you know, I know you're not into hallucinogens and all that. I said, where did that come from? He said it was just thought. He said, I just put a lot of thought into what another world would look like. And this is what came out of his head.
But there are things about Ditko that are unusual, and there are people who seek those unusual states by taking drugs, and there are people who were sure that Steve Ditko had taken drugs, but I don't think it's so. I think that Ditko just had an unusual mind.
In the name of Rael, scourge of demons, I command you, begone. Say it.
In the name of Rael, scourge of demons, I command you, begone.
Must be exactly those words.
How do I get back?
On the astral planes, action follows thought. Will yourself to return to Earth. Hold the thought in your mind, and you'll come back.
When does it begin?
Now.
If Ditko wasn't on drugs when he created Doctor Strange in the 1960s, then it's hard to believe that the people who tried to bring him to the small screen in this 1970s TV pilot weren't on something. There was a Doctor Strange pilot. I don't know if you ever saw that.
You know, I've seen still pictures of it. And based on the still pictures, I could see why it probably didn't work.
It's not a terribly good, it's not a terribly thrilling viewing experience. Right. So with Doctor Strange a genuine cult hit and Spider-Man going from strength to strength, it's clear that Steve Ditko was at the height of his powers, and his partnership with Stan Lee was a huge commercial success. But in a move that surprised everyone except presumably Ditko himself, he walked away from both those comics and Marvel without a word of warning. He was never to illustrate an issue of Doctor Strange or Spider-Man ever again. It was the equivalent in the comic book world of John Lennon leaving Paul McCartney after releasing Help. And to get to grips with the most mysterious moment in comic book history, I'd like to introduce another great comic book creator and big Ditko fan.
My name is Neil Gaiman. I'm a writer. One of the things I write is comics.
Neil has worked for all the major comic book companies and is the creator of the sublime Sandman. He believes that Steve may have walked out on his collaborator Stan Lee for political reasons.
There are famously a number of issues that they clashed over. Stan is meant to have looked at comments of Ditko's where Spider-Man is swinging past protesters and he's meant to be saying things like, now just look at those dirty hippies down there. And Stan would go in and give him a word balloon that says, hey kids, I'm with you, or whatever. And you feel that, you know, politically, there's a wonderful sort of clash there between swinging Stan Lee and magnificently uptight, world-class uptight, impossibly uptight Steve Ditko.
Another theory was the disagreement about the revelation of the identity of Spider-Man's nemesis, the Green Goblin.
Should the Green Goblin be a man in the street, or should he be somebody that we'd known who was close to and we'd liked and looked up to?
Steve wanted it to be someone that no one had seen before, that this was just a random character, because he said in real life, chances are if there was somebody like this, you wouldn't know who it was. But Stan felt for dramatic purposes, if you reveal who the Green Goblin is, it has to be someone in the cast.
I've heard the Green Goblin story, too, that he didn't want the Green Goblin to be Norman because he felt it was, you know, what are the chances that your arch nemesis is your best friend's father?
Obviously, Stan was right. Stan's instincts as a storyteller were absolutely spot on.
But Steve was pretty adamant about that. He felt, no, in real life, this is not the way things would go.
Yet another supposed deal breaker was whether Peter Parker should graduate from college.
I know when I talked with him, again, a lot had to do with what he felt was the essence of Peter Parker, that this was a high school character, that once you graduated him from high school, it was just no longer a character that could make mistakes. So it was time for him to leave and go on and do other things.
And to me, there's been all these stories about the reason that Stan and Steve did split up on Spider-Man. You know, it's the story about the Green Goblin. There's the story that, you know, Ditko didn't like some of the psychological stuff that was creeping into it. You know, he felt as if there was a veiled liberalism in Stan's scripts. But to me, in all honesty, I think it is just that kind of creative urge to go off and do something on your own. You've just reached a point where you feel, I'm not really getting the attention I deserve here. I'm going to go and prove I can do it myself.
Steve just came in one day, dropped off his last Spider-Man, and told whoever it was that was there, that was it. He was done. And he was leaving.
Both Spider-Man and Doctor Strange were big hits with Marvel fans, so Ditko's leaving potentially posed huge problems for the company. Stan Lee moved quickly to replace him. I went to Long Island to meet the man who had the tough task of stepping into Ditko's shoes.